Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate on this panel. I was asked to share USAID's perspective on enabling the private sector to support food safety in domestic markets, both informal and informal, in Africa. And this is a topic that, that I'm eager to share with you. I did want to note that that I do, so I represent USAID. I am with the Bureau for Food Security, and for those who are not familiar, the Bureau for Food Security has the mandate to lead a whole-of-government initiative called Feed the Future, which aims to combat global hunger and poverty. These objectives are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, which we've been hearing about. So I just wanted to note that as I talk about the way we engage the private sector, it is with the aim of contributing to impacts related to the Sustainable Development Goals. This morning we heard a lot about the importance of food safety. We heard new evidence around the challenges and opportunities for food safety, capacity building in Africa. So I don't need to go into that so much. But I did want to note that, that USAID has benefited enormously from the contributions to the evidence base that we've heard about this morning. And in fact, it's informing our own research agenda going forward. Research was also something noted this morning. And so I wanted to know that USAID is on board with building that evidence base, which is so critical. I'm going to start by sharing our approach to private sector engagement broadly. We've been developing this approach over many years and have a number of tools. Then I'm going to talk about food safety in the context of the U.S. government's global food security strategy, which is the strategy that we're using to implement the Feed the Future initiative. And then I'm going to wrap up by sharing our approach to private sector engagement in the context of increasing food safety in domestic markets, with examples in Africa. I think that as my presentation goes on, you'll agree that that our approach is very much in line with many of the recommendations coming out of the Global Food Safety Partnerships report on Africa food safety capacity building, which is encouraging. The timing of those recommendations are really good. Okay, so here we go. As I talk about USAID's private sector engagement approach, I'm going to continue to come back to the importance of identifying roles in this space, and I think that that's appropriate for this panel because you're going to hear from some other panelists talking about their distinct perspectives and the actions that their organizations are taking to stimulate investment and support to food safety capacity building. One thing I wanted to note, though, broadly, is that when USAID considers how to engage with the private sector and implement market-based approaches, this has evolved to become a mandate for both USAID staff and partners. We are required to ask questions, these 3 questions, every time we approach a development problem. And in this way, I think we are in line with the 3rd recommendation that comes from the GFSP report around market-led solutions. So these questions are, first, could there be a market-based approach to addressing this issue? Then second, what are the roles and interests of the private sector in addressing this issue? And third, are there factors constraining the private sector from involvement or investment? So this helps us define both the critical roles of the private sector, and we're talking about food safety. We quickly arrive at a place where we see critical roles for the private sector. But then when we understand what those roles are, it clarifies the appropriate role of a bilateral donor such as USAID vis-a-vis the appropriate role for a public sector actor or a non-state actor. So we feel it's really important to start here. I want to make a distinction between private sector engagement and private sector development, just so that we're all on the same page. So how does USAID define private sector engagement? It's the full range of modalities that the agency uses to interface with mainly for-profit firms in order to further our development objectives. We do this in a few ways. So it could look like transactional support. One of the modalities is to provide direct or indirect financing to support a specific transaction with a partner. This could take the form of our Development Credit Authority, which is a partial credit guarantee. Or we could be talking about public-private partnerships, which are formalized partnerships with the private sector. It involves a commitment of resources on both sides, and this includes something like the Global Development Alliance. Or it could be informal collaboration, where there are no formal resource commitments, but where there's a commitment to sustain relationships and build trust, and that we've found really leads to some strong alignment of agendas and objectives. It enables us to crowd in partners and networks, which is a big part of coordination. And I'll note that our role in the Global Food Safety Partnership, I believe, it helps to reinforce the importance of informal collaboration and sustaining networks. So what's private sector development? How is that distinct? It's more programmatic, and it can include things like what were mentioned earlier today, strengthening the business enabling environment, for example, or providing public goods to facilitate investment by companies, or strengthening capacity. So capacity building, enabling environment, constraints, and public goods. Those are all parts of what private sector development can include. There's a lot of application for these tools in the food safety space, and these tools continue to evolve. We're learning from them, and we always seek new ways to leverage private capital to achieve our development objectives. So quickly on the U.S. government's global food security strategy, we've been talking about the importance of public health. We've also talked quite a bit about trade. The Global Food Safety Partnership report that we learned about did its best to document and take stock of some of USAID's investments in food safety, and that's really challenging because we characterize our work in many different ways, so it's not easy. But I wanted to introduce you to, again, our highest level goal of sustainable reduction in hunger, malnutrition, and poverty, again, aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, but also to make you aware that when we think about addressing food safety and food safety support in sub-Saharan Africa, we see that that effort, those investments, we hypothesize that they will contribute to all three top-level development objectives, including inclusive and sustainable agriculture-led growth, strengthened resilience among people and systems, and a well-nourished population, particularly women and children. So we are aiming to advance all of these goals by a focus on food safety in Africa. And then below, you'll see some illustrative results that we believe can contribute to these objectives. The title of this policy briefing today does focus on food systems, and food systems is a perspective and it's a lens we're applying to the work that we're doing. Our strategy emphasizes a systems approach. Our increasing emphasis on affecting food safety change in domestic markets, both informal and formal, does stem from a development approach that takes this food systems perspective. With our new awareness of the role of food systems on diet and nutrition, on the affordability, accessibility, and acceptability of food, we see food safety as inextricably linked to critical nutrition objectives. So the context, and we've been hearing a lot about this, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. Fundamentally, we see low levels of public and private sector investment in Africa. We see a confusing and costly food safety management system, diverse and changing diets, and ultimately, right now, USAID is focused on how do we address these this nexus to mitigate the threat on public health. And more closer to our organization's goals, to the investments that we're making through the Global Food Security Strategy, which is about $1 billion a year. So I'm going to focus now on how we apply the tools of private sector engagement and development to enabling the private sector to support food safety in domestic and informal markets in Africa. Some examples I'm highlighting here include our work with the Global Food Safety Partnership. We engage with the Global Food Safety Partnership and have since 2012 because we acknowledge that it is really challenging to coordinate at a global level, at a regional level, at a country level, and we have seen the role of the GFSP in helping us to do that, to facilitate exchange of information and knowledge, and also to get to know new partners. We've had the opportunity to work with some private sector partners within the Global Food Safety Partnership, but also at the same time we're doing that, we're interacting with them outside of the GFSP through government development alliances, such as noted here, Partners in Food Solutions, which some of you might be familiar with, but it's an interesting model that that leverages in-kind company staff time to build capacity among small and medium food processors in East and Southern Africa. Some of the companies that we work with include General Mills, Cargill, Royal DSM, Buehler, Hershey, Land O'Lakes, and Ardent Mills. That's on the private sector engagement side. On the private sector development side, a couple of examples to highlight from this list include our work with Dahlberg, which manages our investment support program. And this program is positioning an agricultural finance and investment platform to support our USAID missions in our Feed the Future priority countries, to integrate finance within their global food security strategy country plans, which are aligned with the National Agricultural Investment Plans that Chris mentioned earlier today with CADAP. So really country-led, but we want to see how we can contribute to those investment priorities, and finance is a critical part of the enabling environment that we need to address to increase investment in support of food safety outcomes. Another quick example, our collaboration with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration through the Food Safety Network enables us to leverage our government-to-government mandate that USDA and FDA have, and their technical expertise to strengthen food safety regulatory frameworks and management systems. So here you see some work on with private sector engagement focused on engagement with specific for-profit firms, but also ways we address the enabling environment and regulatory frameworks. Okay. And I'm gonna wrap up now with just reviewing some of the core principles for action on food safety in domestic markets. Again, both formal and informal. We are paying very close attention to the recommendations coming out of some of the new evidence Christina mentioned, Listra mentioned. So informed by those recommendations and our own awareness of the needs, we will be focusing on facilitating collaboration among food system stakeholders, including donors. This is, again, another theme that's really come out today. This is a multi-sectoral approach requiring a lot of coordination, and this is a key principle of ours. Second, we must promote expanded markets for safe and nutritious food. That's an imperative, and we aim to do that by raising consumer demand for safe and nutritious food. Again, it's encouraging to hear that we're all saying the same things. Consumers will be drivers of change, and we need to help them to organize and empower them. Addressing gaps in food safety through a focus on food systems, I've mentioned. But also, there is enormous food industry leadership in this space, and we want to leverage that and align our investments where that leadership is happening. As our role as donor, we see is important in that way. We also want to empower our public sector partners and actors, leading to strengthened systems. Again, this is we've been talking about this all day. Finally, the last 2 points I'll make is that, and specific and to formal and informal sectors, some really great work coming out of ILRI on the distinctions between formal and informal sectors and what the opportunities are. We will encourage formal sector leadership in specific countries and build capacity. Addressing enabling environment constraints specific to formal sectors, it will be part of our approach and agenda going forward. Improving access to finance for food and beverage, small and medium-sized enterprises will also be something that we're going to be dedicating some attention to. And then finally, in the informal sector, to facilitate the adoption of food safety best practices. Again, there's a need to focus on enabling environment constraints that will be distinct from what they are in the formal sector, and we want to pay attention to those. And I shouldn't have left this to the end, but we do need to recognize the role of gender, in particular in the informal sector, and that's something that we'll be paying quite a bit of attention to as we also contribute over time to the evidence base. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. This is a very important contribution in terms of private sector development and private sector engagement, USAID's approach, and a number of key issues going forward. And we're happy that you also raised the issue of gender. I think we haven't heard much about gender this morning, so that's a good point. So thank you very much.